Grafino. It seemed as if she'd done nothing but lean on Michael the past year. Most men wouldn't have stuck around, but he had. Now it was time to give him what he wanted, a wedding date. She didn't know why she was hesitating, except that so many things were changing in her life. Since Michael had proposed to her a year ago, her mother had died, her stepfather had put the family home up for sale, and her younger sister had moved in with her. A part of her just wanted to stop, take a few breaths, and think for a while, instead of rushing headlong into another life-changing event. But Michael was pushing for a date, and she was grateful to him for sticking by her, so how could she say no? And why would she want to? Michael was a good man. Her mother had adored him. Julia could still remember the night she'd told her mom about the engagement. Sarah DeMarco hadn't been out of bed in days, and she hadn't smiled in many weeks, but that night she'd beamed from ear to ear. The knowledge that her oldest daughter was settling down with the son of one of her best friends had made her last days so much easier. "We should go, Julia. It's time to meet the event coordinator." She turned to face him, thinking again what a nice-looking man he was with his light brown hair, brown eyes, and a warm, ready smile. The olive skin of his Italian heritage and the fact that he spent most of his days out on the water, running a charter boat service off Fisherman's Wharf, kept his skin a dark, sunburned red. "What's wrong?" he asked, a curious glint in his eye. "You're staring at me." "Was I? I'm sorry." "Don't be." He paused, then said, "It's been a while since you've really looked at me." "I don't think that's true. I look at you all the time. So do half the women in San Francisco," she added. "Yeah, right," he muttered. "Let's go." Julia cast one last look at the view, then followed Michael to the museum. The Palace of the Legion of Honor had been built as a replica of the Palais de la Légion d'Honneur in Paris. In the front courtyard, known as the Court of Honor, was one of Rodin's most famous sculptures, The Thinker. Julia would have liked to stop and ponder the statue, as well as the rest of her life, but Michael was a man on a mission, and he urged her toward the front doors. As they entered the museum, her step faltered. In a few moments, they would sit down with Monica Harvey, the museum's event coordinator, and Julia would have to pick her wedding date. She shouldn't be nervous. It wasn't as if she were a young girl. She was 28 years old. It was time to get married, have a family. "Liz was right. This place is cool," Michael said. Julia nodded in agreement. Her younger sister Liz had been the one to suggest the museum. It was a pricey location, but Julia had inherited some money from her mother that would pay for most of the wedding. "The offices are downstairs," Michael added. "Let's go." Julia drew in a deep breath as the moment of truth came rushing toward her. "I need to stop in the restroom. Why don't you go ahead? I'll be right there." When Michael left, Julia walked over to get a drink of water from a nearby fountain. She was sweating, and her heart was practically jumping out of her chest. What on earth was the matter with her? She'd never felt so panicky in her life. It was all the changes, she told herself again. Her emotions were too close to the surface. But she could do this. They were only picking a date. She wasn't going to say, "I do," this afternoon. That would be months from now when she was ready, really ready. Feeling better, she headed downstairs, passing by several intriguing exhibits along the way. Maybe they could stop and take a look on the way out. "Mrs. Harvey is finishing up another appointment," Michael told her as she joined him. "She'll be about 10 minutes. I need to make a call. Can you hold down the fort?" "Sure." Julia sat down on the couch, wishing Michael hadn't left. She really needed a distraction from her nerves. As the minutes passed, she became aware of the faint sound of music coming from down the hall. The melody was lovely, but sad, filled with unanswered dreams, regrets. It reminded her of a piece played on the balalaika in one of her music classes in college, and it called to her in a way she couldn't resist. Music had always been her passion, Just a quick peek, she told herself, as she got to her feet and moved into the corridor. The sounds of the strings grew louder as she entered the room at the end of the hall. It was a tape, she realized, playing in the background, intended, no doubt, to complement the equally haunting historic photographs on display. Within seconds, she was caught up in a journey through time. She couldn't look away, and she didn't want to look away, especially when she came to the picture of the little girl. Captioned, "The Coldest War of All," the black-and-white photograph showed a girl of no more than 3 or 4 years old standing behind the gate of an orphanage in Moscow. The photo had been taken by someone named Charles Manning, the same man who appeared to have taken many of the pictures in the exhibit. Julia studied the picture in detail. She wasn't as interested in the Russian scene as she was in the girl. The child wore a heavy dark coat, pale thick stockings, and a black woolen cap over her curly blonde hair. The expression in her eyes begged for someone, whoever was taking the picture perhaps, to let her out, to set her free, to help her. An uneasy feeling crept down Julia's spine. The girl's features, the oval shape of her face, the tiny freckle at the corner of her eyebrow, the slope of her small, upturned nose, seemed familiar. She noticed how the child's pudgy fingers clung to the bars of the gate. It was odd, but she could almost feel that cold steel beneath her own fingers. Her breath quickened. She'd seen this picture before, but where? A vague memory danced just out of reach. Her gaze moved to the silver chain hanging around the girl's neck and the small charm dangling from it. It looked like a swan, a white swan, just like the one her mother had given to her when she was a little girl. Her heart thudded in her chest, and the panicky feeling she'd experienced earlier returned. "Julia?" She jumped at the sound of Michael's booming voice. She'd forgotten about him. "Mrs. Harvey is waiting for us," he said as he crossed the room. "What are you doing in here?" "Looking at the photos." "We don't have time for that. Come on." "Just a second." She pointed at the photograph. "Does this girl seem familiar to you?" Michael gave the photo a quick glance. "I don't think so. Why?" "I have a necklace just like the one that little girl is wearing," she added. "Isn't that odd?" "Why would it be odd? It doesn't look unusual to me." Of course it didn't. There were probably 1,000,000 girls who had that same necklace. "You're right. Let's go." But as she turned to follow Michael out of the room, she couldn't help taking one last look at the picture. The girl's eyes called out to her, eyes that looked so much like her own. But that little girl in the photograph didn't have anything to do with her. Did she? "It cost me a fortune to get you out of jail," Joe Carmichael said. Alex Manning leaned back in his chair and kicked his booted feet up onto the edge of Joe's desk. Joe, a balding man in his late 30s, was one of his best friends, not to mention the West Coast editor of World News magazine, a publication that bought 80% of Alex's photographs. They'd been working together for over 10 years now. Some days, Alex couldn't believe it had been more than a decade since he'd begun his work as a photojournalist right after graduating from Northwestern University. Other days, like today, it felt more like 100 years. "You told me to get those pictures at any cost, and I did," Alex replied. "I didn't tell you to upset the local police while you were doing it. You look like shit, by the way. Who beat you up?" "They didn't give me their business cards, and it comes with the territory, you know that. What I know is that the magazine wants me to rein you in. If you don't want my photographs, I'll sell them somewhere else." Joe hastily put up his hands. "I didn't say that. But you're taking too many chances, Alex. You're going to end up dead or in some prison I can't get you out of. You worry too much. And you don't worry enough, which is what makes you good. It also makes you dangerous and expensive."